think in life, anything that's come before is really going to prepare you for what's ahead, right? So,
I've seen people go from trading their own money on a broker into a prop firm, and just having those parameters in place that they can't break, visualizing it in the dashboard has actually made them better and more consistent.
I don't try to pass an evaluation within 1 week or a couple of days, because it just seems like that is this general sort of mentality behind a lot of guys. The path for prop firms was that brokers were going to get involved. If you get it wrong in times like this or weeks like this, and you keep on saying to yourself, no, it's going to drop, this is where you can, sort of literally blow yourself up.
Okay, hello traders. Welcome to the Blueberry Funded Trader Spotlight. I'm Marcus, the General Manager of Blueberry Funded. This is the first in a series of trader interviews that we're doing, where we sit down with some of the most talented traders in our community that have earned payouts, and just dive into their strategy, what drives them, their experiences. So whether you're an aspiring trader or a seasoned pro, these conversations can give you real insight into what it takes to succeed in the world of prop trading. So today I'm excited to introduce Marco, who it's really good actually, because Marco has been with us since the very beginning. At Blueberry Funded, we've been around since August, so 6 to 7 months into our journey as a prop firm. And Marco, you came on board right back in August for your first challenge. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks so much, Marcus. A pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So look, I guess just to dive straight in and get started, can you tell us a bit about your trading journey and what got you into trading originally?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey, to be honest. My initial sort of foray into trading was back in the initial craziness of crypto. I think that was probably back in 2000 and maybe 18, 17, when sort of Bitcoin really got into the public sort of domain. And I remember back then it was probably around about $8,000 per Bitcoin. And, really I remember buying some, all right, and not trading it, just buying it. And I remember it started to shoot up to 16,000, eventually got to about 20,000. It was the local top. And then I started thinking, maybe I should learn trading, and maybe I can actually earn more Bitcoin without having to sort of, take my own cash and invest, and rather see if I can just trade what I have, right? So that's really where it started. So my initial sort of foray into trading was in the crypto industry. And then pretty much after that initial craziness, sort of Bitcoin crashed down to 5,000 or whatever it was, I can't really remember, or 3,000. And it went through like a long period of just very boring price action, very range trading. It was very difficult to sort of trade in that environment. Yeah. So this was still very early. So then I got into Forex, because people would tell me, no, but Forex can move at least a bit more, and doesn't move huge amounts, but it's a bit more controllable, and you can sort of learn it from there. And yeah, that's sort of how I started to progress from crypto into Forex. But this was still important. This is still why I had a sort of full-time employment, or actually I had my own business. So I was doing this a little bit more on the side. So I was learning and making mistakes and just educating myself. So really in the beginning, it was really all about that, just doing a little bit on the side, but trying to learn as much as I could.
Awesome. Fantastic. I mean, is it still something you do on the side, or does it nowadays take up a lot more of your time compared to back when you started?
Sorry, just say that again.
So do you still trade on the side, or is it something you now do as sort of a full-time?
No, now it's full-time. Yeah, so now it's full-time, and it really became full-time really after COVID. So COVID had a massive impact on my business, which was actually in the coffee industry. I was a coffee roaster by profession, and it just had such a massive impact. It was very difficult to sort of overcome the barriers that were put in place in our industry here in South Africa. Basically sort of people couldn't trade. A lot of my large customers were just, they couldn't survive, and they closed down. And of course that impacted my business in a big way. But luckily I had trading to fall back on, because I'd already grown my personal account to like a decent amount, and I was able to just pivot and start doing that full time. And I had really the 6 years of learning and crashing and burning and, understanding what type of trading strategy suits my way of thinking and how my brain sees the markets. So that's what was allowed me to be able to do it, because if it happened very early on, or if I tried to do it too early without having the knowledge that I did have and the experience, Yeah, it would have been very difficult.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear. And well, firstly, I'm sorry to hear that that happened to the business that you were running. But I guess sort of the brighter side of that story is sort of that you had the ability or something you've been working hard on the side for many years, and you could hone that skill to the point you can now do it full time. And that's an amazing story, because I think especially during COVID, so much happened to so many people, and not everyone had other things to look into. So or to sort of put their time and efforts into in order to make money. So that's an amazing story. And what I'm interested though is the transition from, you started as a crypto trader originally and then moved into Forex for the volatility, or the more predictable volatility, I guess you'd say. So at what point did you then move into the prop trading side of the space and doing prop challenges?
Yeah, so I'd already come across obviously the whole concept of prop trading. Just being a trader, you tend to interact with other traders online, and you're part of a few sort of trading groups, really just to share ideas, etc. Are you still there, Marcus? I'm just checking. Okay, great. I thought I
Yeah, I
missed
think
you
I just had a
before.
small dropout, but
Okay, great.
yeah, still here.
And I heard a few of the guys that I knew about who were already trading props. And I guess I just was a little bit hesitant because I'd heard, well, first of all, you hear, these crazy rules, and, the rules are there to burn you. And then, of course, you hear some of the scammers out there. So I was a little bit hesitant. But of course, I understood that maybe FTMO was like maybe the more trusted sort of prop firm out there. And to be honest, as soon as I heard Blueberry was starting, I already knew about Blueberry, the broker itself, and I knew it was reputable and had a strong brand. And I thought, well, maybe this was the opportunity to maybe get involved and actually maybe start a prop challenge and just see how it goes. Really, and just have that nice balance between trading your own funds and maybe growing a prop firm account and try to push it as much, or grow it as much as I possibly can, but obviously from a long haul perspective and looking at a long term perspective. So that was really the idea behind it.
Oh, fantastic. So Blueberry Funded is kind of one of your really the first forays into the prop side of the FX space.
Correct. Yes.
Fantastic. No, that makes the whole journey feel a lot more special. I'm glad I wasn't even aware of that until we started doing this. So it makes me really excited for this to be the first in our trader interview series. So I guess you sort of highlighted a few of the reasons you initially chose Blueberry Funded then, but was there anything else that went into your decision-making process for choosing us as the prop firm you decided to go with?
Yeah, it was really, I think, based purely on reputation, and just obviously keeping track on what was happening in prop firms. I think the path for prop firms was that brokers were going to get involved. And I'd listened to some podcasts of prop firms, etc., where a lot of guys were saying, a lot of the back end infrastructure for a lot of these companies or prop firms before was handled by the brokers in any case. So you started to understand really what was going on. And I think, just purely based on reputation. You guys had a strong brand name already, and I knew that you guys already had done a lot of the back end work for a lot of the prop firms out there. So if you guys were getting involved and putting your name behind it, for me, the legitimacy was already there. I didn't really, and I just thought, let's go with you guys first, because it was really based on brand and on legitimacy that was there already. Purely, that was the biggest point for me.
No, thank you. That means a lot, and it's really good to hear you spread that being the reasoning why you decided to join us in the first place. And look, it is an interesting point. My background, before sort of being Blueberry Funded, was doing a lot of prop infrastructure, on the brokerage side and things like that. And it's an interesting point you make, because that really is the truth of it. Is so many of these brokers, they're providing the infrastructure, liquidity services, and are almost involved but watching from the sidelines everything that happened in the prop space. So it's no secret that the last year or two has been quite chaotic in this industry. And brokers that already have a wealth of experience in the forex space, have seen a lot of the mistakes that a lot of these beginner or really new entrants to the prop space made, and can come in and sort of do a best of both worlds offering, to really make a more sustainable product. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, and have been doing here at Blueberry Funded, since we launched. But I guess to bring it back to your trading, what strategies do you implement, and what's your journey been to finding the successful ones that you now use in your trading?
Yeah, so I think, as in most industries, especially and specifically for trading, there are many ways to skin a cat. There's so many different approaches and strategies out there, and there's no one clear solution. Whichever scam mentor is out there on X trying to say this is the way and this is the only way, and all other ways of trading is going to fail is not true, right? So for me, I think each trader has an individual way of thinking, all right, in terms of just how their brain learns and understands things out there. So I think you just have to look at all approaches and see what works for you. So I started, from the basic stuff of moving averages, sort of supply and demand, and Bollinger Bands. Tried everything, right? So, but now really what makes sense to me and how I understand how the market works is really smart money concepts or ICT sort of approach, really. So it's really just understanding where the liquidity is in the market and waiting for that liquidity to be grabbed and wait for a pattern of reversal that most likely will happen after that, right? So that's my approach, and I'm a swing trader. So, I like to take my time to analyze the market, really plan out my entries, so I don't like to be rushed. So that's why I'm not a day trader. I'm just not suited to that. So I think that's also another thing for traders to understand is, are they keen on sort of be involved in the market all the time, which obviously takes more risk, but maybe it's what sort of drives them. Or are you after something a bit more sort of calm? And especially if you have another job or if you have another sort of money income generating option on the side while you're trading, swing trading makes the most sense. And that's how I started. So that's sort of what I stuck to, and it works for me. So yeah, that's how I trade.
Yeah, and I think you've highlighted something really important for traders, which is there is no one size fits all strategy, or even the strategy you choose also depends on what you're after. I mean, as someone who's worked in the trading space for a while, people always ask me, what's the holy grail? What's the best strategy? And it's, look, I mean, data wise, there are some strategies. Like you said to me, what was the best kind of strategy, for last month in Blueberry Fund? And I could probably statistically find the one that was, on average more profitable, but that was the most profitable one in the last month. Strategies that work well for certain periods of time or cycles in the market don't work well for others. So it's one where you have to always be learning and expanding your knowledge, because there is no one size fits all strategy. And just when you think you found it, the markets change, patterns change, and then, the way you have to trade, whether it's implementing the same strategy differently or finding a new strategy, becomes required. So it's definitely a super important point that, I think in most of the podcasts or things I do, it always ends up coming back to that is there's no one size fits all solution, in this industry, not just in trading, even in running a prop firm or any trading business. But I think, look, so you're, doing trading full time, which is really, the dream of so many traders out there. That's why they start with a prop firm challenge, to get access to that larger amount of, simulated capital. So, I mean, you're sort of at that point, I think a lot of traders aspire to, which is really exciting. I mean, because you're doing this full time, like what is your typical, trading routine on a given day, or what does a day in the life of Marco trading look like?
Yeah. So look, it is amazing. And I think it's really down to the fact that I'm more in control of my time, right? So being a business owner, which was awesome. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't start my own business straight out of school. So I still worked in corporate for 10 years and I always wanted to do something myself. So trading gives you that time element, which is awesome. So yeah, I stick to a very sort of set routine. Again, that's sort of what I prefer. I'm up pretty early in the morning, sort of 4:30, 5, I'm up. And then I sort of get some exercise. So I'm in the gym for about 45 minutes. Then I go for a walk with my wife for about 5Ks. And then I'm back around about just before London Open, right? So then I'll start looking at the markets, just get a general feel of where things are, look how the previous day closed. And again, I'm a swing trader, so I'm not too focused on immediately looking for opportunities, right? So I'm just waiting for price to get to the levels that I'm expecting to. If I can see that it doesn't really, I look at the calendar, I do look at the economic calendar for the day, but I really have that planned out at the beginning of the week. So I know roughly when is the volatility going to enter the market. So if I see, for example, a lot of red folder news in the week that only starts Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, I'm not really focused too much, looking for opportunities. I sort of really prefer to wait until the second half of the week to see things going. But pretty much I still stick to that same routine. So I'll look at the charts during London, see if there's anything interesting, take a break. After about 2 hours, go have some lunch, and then again, sort of just during New York, just to see if there's anything interesting happening. So that's really what I'm doing. The bulk of my work is done probably on Sunday. Sunday afternoon, I'm just planning ahead and already have a set idea of where I want to play in the market. If that plan changes, that's fine, no problem. But I already have a general idea on what I'm looking for during the week.
And that's really, I love that, because I always say it to people, it's like the best, trades you make are when, you can't trade almost. So it's like over the weekend, markets are closed unless you're trading crypto. And it's almost the best point to reflect and actually plan out or take a look at the charts, because you're not distracted by all the movements and all the noise of things happening. Like you might be doing analysis and you see a price spike because the market's open and, that's interfering with your train of thought, or you might be really biased to things that are happening in the moment right now. The great thing about planning it out from the weekend or a Sunday is there's not all that noise or things going on. There's no major news events. The market's not opening. You're not seeing random spikes or ticks or things that might impact your thinking. And it's almost like I don't know. I always describe it as kind of like a meditative time to actually look at the charts because of that lack of movement. I mean, it might just be a personal thing of mine because I get distracted easily by things in the very short term. But I think it's a really interesting sort of way to pre-think or like premeditate on what's about to come or predict over the next week of the market being open. So that's interesting. I mean, I guess it's a bit off topic, but so you mentioned that, so before becoming an entrepreneur, so you worked in the corporate space for 10 years. And this is actually an interesting thing that, I'm going a bit off like some of the questions I sent through, but, I often see, because the thing I find interesting about the prop space, it's the demographic, compared to the broker space I come from, was that there's a lot more younger traders in it. And I think a lot of people, in their early 20s that, want to dive in, become pro traders right away and, make a lot of money really quickly, or become a full-time day trader straight away. I mean, did you find that, obviously you're, doing the corporate, lifestyle, the 9 to 5 and everything you learned in that, especially over 10 years, did that ever help you sort of then, become an entrepreneur, or do you think that has helped, or the things you might have learned in that then help the trading that you now do full-time? It's an interesting conversation I have with people in terms of, how other things that happen in your life actually influence or help you learn how to be a better trader, over time. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think in life, anything that's come before is really going to prepare you for what's ahead, right? So, I wouldn't have wanted to start trading earlier. I think to be a good quality trader, sure, I'm not sure if, starting out too early is always is the right idea. This is just my general opinion because, and I know, look, when I was young, my parents used to tell me, yeah, you're too young, you don't have experience, and used to get really irritated at that stuff, right? Because you just want to go out in the world and do your thing, and don't want to listen to what older people have to say. But it's, in a way, I think you do need to have some sort of just general life experience, because it's, trading is not just about what's on the chart. There's like just so many other things. There's, political environments, sort of economics. And if for you to have like a good understanding on how the world works, I think that does assist from a certain perspective. And, just how to stay calm, even though it's a very lonely place, you trade, it's you and it's yourself, right? You're not really having to deal with other people. But I think just having that experience of either working in a corporate environment or maybe starting your own business or just any other sort of life experience before you get into trading, I think is a must. I really do, because I think too many high expectations are set for young people, right? So they make it out like it's this really easy thing, and it's not. Really trading is, I think, one of the most difficult professions out there, because it's not just, I put in the amount of hours that I put in to get where I am now is insane. Okay, it really is. What my wife tells me that she doesn't understand how I just persevered for so long, because it really does. And in the early days, that means nothing, right? It really doesn't. So, maybe if you put a lot of hours into your corporate job or for your entrepreneurial job, you might see those, sort of the output of that at a certain stage. But for trading, it's not so much, because it's such a mental thing, and there's so many other aspects involved in it. So yeah, I would say that I'm very happy that I traveled this path of corporate, starting my own business before I got into trading full time.
Yeah, there's more to trading than just trading is a really important lesson, I think, and it's kind of, and it's like that with anything really professional, like professional, athletes and things like that. It's more than just like what you're doing in the moment or the exact skill for what you want to achieve in front of you. It's everything else in your life influences your psychology, in terms of how you trade. So it's a good point that I think again, the gurus don't really tell you that online. They only talk about specifically trading strategies, things on the chart. But it's something people don't talk about enough, which is sort of the other things in your life and the journey that you go through in. It could be a corporate career, it could be, an athletic career, it could be being an entrepreneur, that then actually help inform your psychology, mental state on how to trade. So it is really interesting to hear. I think, look, bring it back to the challenge side and Blueberry Funded. I mean, what advice would you give to traders, looking to pass one of our challenges?
Yeah. So what I find pretty interesting, and this is, I'm on the Discord, the Blueberry Funded Discord server, and it's interesting that I find in terms of one of the rules that you guys have, which is that the balance can't go below the 150% margin rule. Okay, which I think is a great rule.
On the
Makes sense.
margin level rule, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. But I see so many people, saying, how they can't trade if they, by going below the 150% margin rule, or they just realized that they went and, they entered a trade and they went under. I'm always thinking, there's so many, it seems like there's like a lot of guys that are going out, basically putting full amounts of risk going after a trade. And like, for me, that's the one big thing. Like, really, take your time. Right? Don't try to pass an evaluation within, 1 week or a couple of days, because it just seems like that is this general sort of mentality behind a lot of guys, a lot of traders. And I think, again, that's just, it's lack of experience. And I think you need to probably look, I blew many personal accounts, right? Luckily they weren't massive where I was still early, but I must have blown easy 4 or 5 personal accounts where I put some money in, and after a couple of months, right, then I just put a bit more money in. So I've gone through that irritation and that hurt of like, it's such a waste of time. Like, if I just taken my time, because you have to start from zero again. So if you fail a challenge, and because you put too much risk, then you have to buy another challenge, and you just keep on going through that whole process. So take your time. Don't have expectations of, I want to pass this in a week or two. And really, it's that sort of, it's just the lack of patience. And I think that's one thing that I've built over a long period of time, is having some patience. So for me, I think that is rule number one, is just take your time, manage the risk. It takes you 3 months to pass it. That's okay. That's fine. Passing a challenge or passing evaluation, I think is, something in itself to be proud of, right? So again, because you might pass it maybe by doing one good trade that you selected correctly, might be awesome. But can you then keep the funded account if you get a funded account? Because you hear about these stats that guys get a funded account and within a couple of weeks they've lost it again, because they've blown it, right? So yeah, for me that would be number one suggestion or advice.
Yeah, I always say like the best trades you ever make are the trades you never place, because I think trading is an exercise in patience. You're 100% right. And that sort of echoes a lot of my sentiment. And the data backs it as well from what we've seen. We were going over the numbers for February, and, on average, it takes a trader to pass a challenge, maybe between 40 to 50 trades. Now, and so some people, that's a lot of trades, but it's funny, the average amount of trades that people that fail a challenge take is usually like over 80, give or take. And so even the data sort of backs, it's like the more you trade, the more room for error. Like, it's an exercise in patience and simplicity, in order to pass the challenge and be profitable long term. And look, I think you raise a really good point on the rules that we have. Look, we don't make a secret of it. We have some of the stricter rules in the industry. We've been doing, being in the Forex space for a long time, myself and, the wider sort of staff at Blueberry. And so we base a lot of our rules around data and, quite a lot of analytics. And so, look, trading ultimately is hard. It's not, an easy pursuit. And, our rules, reflect how hard it is, because we actually want to teach people to be better traders over time. It's one of the things I really loved about the prop space when I started getting into it, is this actually has a big educational component. And, I've seen people go from trading their own money on a broker into a prop firm, and, just having those parameters in place that they can't break, visualizing it, in the dashboard has actually made them better and more consistent over time. So it's really great to hear from one of our traders, these rules have worked for you. And yeah, I think the way that you trade is definitely in line with the reason that we have these rules is to, make people more patient, don't over leverage the account, and, don't take too much risk ultimately. So that's, it's really great to hear that. But I think, so you mentioned there that, you have, as all great traders have, it's one time or another. So you have blown accounts, over the course of your trading career. If you don't mind me asking, what was sort of the worst or the biggest loss that you had, and how did you recover from it? Or I guess in terms of blowing a large account, what was the reason behind it, and what did you learn from it to then improve as you continued on your trading journey?
Yeah, so I think early in the sort of maybe my third year of trading, I think I had a personal account that was probably sitting at about $25,000, about there, and I think I didn't end up blowing it completely, but I think it went down eventually, in very quick time. This is the scary thing, right? So from having about $25,000 in the personal account, I think I landed up on about $5,000, and then I had to sort of slowly build that up again. So that was like a big hit, right? And that was, when looking back at it again, it was the inability to, sort of change bias. Sort of the ego literally takes over, and you cannot admit to yourself that you're wrong on a certain viewpoint, on a certain trade or a certain currency pair, whatever the case is. And at times, Forex is, relatively sort of manageable from a volatility perspective. But you see this week, for example, with the euro, how it's gone absolutely. I think it's done like 3 or 4 standard deviations of its normal range. If you get it wrong in times like this or weeks like this, and you keep on saying to yourself, no, it's going to drop, this is where you can, sort of literally blow yourself up. So I remember it was during a time like this where there was big volatility, unexpected sort of big moves in the market where no one's really expecting it. And I just kept on, I can't remember if it was a long or a short, but I just kept on short. Like, for example, it kept on shorting it because I believed that I was going to hit the top. And yeah, I learned my lesson. So definitely I don't do that again. I'm sort of very aware when I get to a stage of where I can't admit that I'm wrong, right? Then I understand the feeling within me when I get to that stage, and then I just, I don't get involved. I just stay out of the market.
No, I think that's what it comes down to, which is really interesting to hear. Look, we've gone through these questions, or we haven't even gotten through quite a lot of them, but it's been a great conversation. I mean, I guess just as a final one, which is something, I've been really wanting to ask from our traders when we do this series. I mean, so you're already, in my mind, sort of living the dream of so many traders I speak to, because you're doing it full time. You've had, highs and lows that we've talked about, but, you're doing it full time consistently. But, what is your goal, in trading? Where do you see yourself in, 5 years from now, like on the current trajectory that you're on?
Yeah. So for me, it's really just about, I think time freedom I'm happy with that, but it's really just about, I think, getting to a place where I believe I have financial freedom for myself and my family. Really, that's really what drives me. I think you do have to have something besides just the monetary aspect of it, something that drives you in terms of, why are you doing this, right? So, and it doesn't have to be trading; it can be anything else. And for me, it's really sort of making sure that my family is completely taken care of. They have everything that they need. My 2 boys can have the flexibility. Also my 2 boys are homeschooled. So that's like, for me, it's awesome that they're at home, I'm at home. We spend a lot of time together. So, that's a big thing for me. So for me, it's just really about
that's your other full-time job apart from trading.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, man. But really, yeah, it's just about growing, just keep on growing the equity, growing the accounts. If I can be fully funded with Blueberry, that's really the goal. All right. So, I'd like to do that within maybe sort of the next year or 2. I don't really have like a set timeline. It's really just about, day to day, just making sure that I'm following the process and I'm sticking to my rules, and it'll come. Right. So I'm not setting like a specific timeline, right? So as long as I'm not breaking my rules and I'm sticking to my plan, everything will come right. And that's really what I follow.
Fantastic. Well, whilst we offer 400 grand in max simulated allocation, through direct evaluations, we do have the scaling plan, which allows traders to scale up to $2 million in simulated capital. So it's quite a trajectory that you can take with that with us, and a lot of opportunity there. And fingers crossed, we we see you go on that scaling journey, and we have you back on here, in the future with even more allocated capital and hopefully a lot more experience and stories to tell. Because it's been really great speaking to you, Marco.
Yeah, well,
So yeah, it's been a good conversation, and really keen to continue seeing your journey with Blueberry Funded.
yeah, awesome, Marcus. Thanks so much, man. Look, my experience with Blueberry has been, fantastic. I must admit, from just the trading conditions, fantastic. The support really is, the support is awesome. They respond efficiently. They get back to you within, sort of respectable times. I've never been left hanging, waiting for some sort of like answer to a question that I posed. So, honestly, there's nothing that I personally can complain about. Yes, it is the first prop firm that I've used, so I don't have a comparison. But, the stories that I've heard, the stories that I've read about in terms of other prop firms with like hidden rules and all this like crazy stuff, I've never, my experience is no, nothing. Perfect. So, for me, 5 stars. I literally cannot give any sort of bad reviews for you.
Fantastic. We really appreciate the feedback. I'm sure the marketing team is definitely going to clip that entire answer right there for socials, knowing them and wanting the good the testimonial from you. But look, we really appreciate it. And again, look, we're just getting started really as a firm. We've been in the game for 6 months now, obviously backed by a company that's been around for 10 years. But look, we've just really been playing catch up with the demand. Look, it means a lot to us that this desire for a broker-backed firm is being this big, and it caught us a bit off guard. So we have a lot more great things in the pipeline for the next 6 months that we're really keen to announce in the coming weeks, which is going to help traders, just have more opportunities in the prop space. So look, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Marco. Hopefully we're going to have you on again in the future with a lot more stories. And yeah, happy trading.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marcus. Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Fantastic.